Hello and welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I am your host, Jennifer Martin, and joining me is my well-traveled sidekick, Jonathan Carey.
Hello, it's good to be back in Colorado.
I know you just set out on a 3-hour tour that turned into that is a Gilligan's Island reference for those of you who are younger.
Before most people's time.
Before most people here were alive. So you set out, and where did you go?
Yeah, I went out to Utah, did Zion National Park, and then drove over and did Monument Valley, Mesa Verde, and Great Sand Dunes. So
lame.
So it was a really boring trip, really nothing to see.
So are you welcome back in those states, or have you been banned?
It's pending a decision. So it was, a lot of time in Utah, skirted into Arizona a little bit, and then back into Colorado. But Southern Colorado is so different from the Colorado we're at, so it kind of feels like a different state almost.
I know. I was trying to follow you and was there as well, but just a little bit off from you in Southern Colorado. And the VRBO we were staying at, the owner said, had in the literature for the house, the police in this area are very attentive. Well, sure enough, our friends got a ticket. They are very attentive. So
that's like the nicest way of putting it I've ever heard.
I know. That's what I thought. I was like, well, he's right. They're attentive. So yeah. And I went to a college tour, Jonathan. I think I mentioned to you, but I have not been to a college campus in quite some time, and things have changed. They really make life much easier for students now.
That's what I've heard. So much different from our time back in the day.
Okay, so here's an example, and then we'll get started and meet our amazing guest. But I just am curious about this. So one of the things they mentioned was, every one of your books will be loaded on this card, and you just show up with the card, put it in the machine, and all of your books will be loaded and ready for you to go. Is that what your process was like?
Definitely not. Half the time you didn't even know what book it was, or even if you really even needed it and could save the ridiculous sums of money that they charge for them. So yeah.
That's what I thought. I was like, kids these days, what's up here?
I know. So,
I drove around to all the used bookstores, to try to get the discount books.
Yeah. I do that, or I would just go without the book because my friend got the book, and I would just use it when I needed it. I mean, of course, I wasn't the model student either. So,
well, and then wasn't it so exciting when you sold them back at the end of and you got some money?
But it was, I don't know. I never had great success with it. I mean, I'd get money, but it's so much less, and then they would then sell it for such more of a marked up amount.
I'm just it's a profit deal, but I just it felt so good to have money.
Yeah. So that always seemed like quite the racket. But
yeah, no, I agree. But I was like, to be young again. But anyway, okay, I am so welcome back. We're happy to have you back in this, the part of the state?
Sure.
I'm like, where am I?
Yeah.
We're glad you're back, even though I haven't seen you in a long time in person. It's still nice to have you back.
Before my trip, I borrowed a sleeping bag.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I did see you.
How soon we forget.
Everything blurs together. So
that was months ago.
I felt like months, except it wasn't. All right. I'm super excited to talk to our guest today. We are going to be speaking with Tiffany Vuong. And let me tell you a little bit about her before we get started, because she was just a blast to talk with. So Tiffany is a speech and language pathologist, and she specializes in early intervention for children between the ages of birth to 3. She works closely with parents to increase their child's communication skills, which ultimately creates a more harmonious family life at home. Tiffany is also the creator of Talk that's TEA Speech, which is a brand that raises awareness for early intervention and overall wellness for parents and SLPs. You can find her on all social media platforms at Talk T Speech. We'll also have that in the show notes. So we are happy to welcome Tiffany. So welcome to Tiffany Vuong. I'm so happy to have you join the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. As soon as I heard about you and was reading about some of the work you've been doing, I said, I have to speak with her because we actually have a lot in common. And I think the work that you've been doing and your specialty is something that a lot of people will get benefit from learning about as well. So I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So before we get started, I always just like to find out, because just my own personal curiosity, tell us your professional story and what led you to become a speech language pathologist and to your current role.
Okay. So I always knew that I did not want a 9-to-5 office job. And I always knew that kind of growing up, but I was very lost in undergrad. I was thinking, maybe I will be a dentist. And then, did terrible in chemistry. So I was like, okay, that's not the route for me. So then I was thinking about all of these different career paths that I could go down. I even went into marketing or public relations. I just knew I didn't want a desk job. So then I graduated from Binghamton University in 2012, and I came out and I interviewed at a few different, marketing agencies, and it just was not the right fit. I just did not feel like myself. But as I was going through high school and undergraduate school, I've always enjoyed working with kids. I did some courses in child development and I volunteered. So my mom actually mentioned speech pathology. She said, I heard about this great field. Maybe that's something you want to look into. And I was like, no, Mom, it's so much schooling. And by the time I get out, I'm going to be so old. And I ended up looking into some pre-professional courses, and I found one that had all different speech courses that I could take, even though I didn't major in speech for my undergraduate degree. And so then I took one intro class and I just really, really enjoyed it. So I kept going with those pre-professional courses and I applied to grad school. I went to Seton Hall for my master's program and I graduated in 2017. And from there, I just started working in early intervention for speech therapy, and I've been here ever since.
I love that story. And I'm just curious, when your mom mentioned this to you, shout out to moms for helping us to find our journey sometimes, but had you heard of a speech pathologist before she mentioned it, or was it like, what is that?
I don't think so. She had mentioned it and I Googled it probably and kind of got some information about it, but I didn't really know how detailed it was and how big the scope of practice really is for speech pathologists. And I think when people think about speech therapy, they think, you're just working one-on-one and working on pronunciation of different sounds and words. And I think that's the first thing I probably thought of too, before I read into it. I think just from there, learning more about it, I was just more and more interested in learning more. So that's kind of how it all came together.
I think that's such a common misconception. I know even when I went into grad school, I was like, they do what? And so now I just tell people everything from here to here. This is everything in this area. And I'm just also curious, because you had a different path, you had a different undergraduate degree. Do you feel like, just because I know some of our listeners as well maybe are in a different field and kind of wondering, is this something I want to do? Do you feel like you were able to use some of those skills from your other courses and marketing and whatnot to what you're doing now? Do any of those transfer?
Yes, definitely. In my undergrad, because like I mentioned, I did not do well in chemistry. So, when I switched over from all of those science courses, I decided to major in English. And that was really just because I didn't feel like anything else interested me.
Mm.
And at Binghamton University, they did not have a speech program. I wonder if I would have done that if I had known about it earlier. But so I majored in English, and I think that really helped me with my writing skills now. So, for any speech therapy documentation, like
Mm.
progress reports, justification of services when we're writing it for parents and schools, I think my writing skills, that's what I took from my undergraduate degree. And then as far as marketing or public relations, I mean, I really didn't go down that road too far, but
Mhm.
I think it's all about like learning how to communicate with people too, because right now for early intervention, I'm constantly working with parents, grandparents,
Mhm.
teachers. So you have to really know how to be able to communicate with all different people.
Yeah, we do also sometimes people in speech pathology will say, "Well, I'm sales. I could never do that." And I said, "Well, in its way, you're kind of when you are diagnosing or recommending treatment. I mean, you're not selling
Mm-hmm.
it, but you're doing a lot of the same where it's educating them about something they didn't know and helping them understand what it is that they need." So I just think it's so interesting how some of those things are transferable. And that is so smart about the English piece, because I remember in grad school, that was one of the areas that people struggled with: report writing, and
Right.
even once you're getting out. So you had such a nice leg up. That's great.
Thank you. It did not feel like that at the time because when I was looking at all the requirements for
Yeah.
grad school, I was like, oh, I wish I knew about speech sooner.
Well, it all worked out, because then look, see, you came in with all these different skills that just, you more well-rounded. So,
Thank
well,
you.
and I want to touch on, so it sounds like you knew from the beginning that you wanted to do early intervention and started with that and are continuing to do that currently,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. I think we've always had a lot of family friends, and they've always brought their babies and toddlers over to my parents' house. And I think I've just always enjoyed that age group and communicating
Mhm.
with them. I kept an open mind though when I went to grad school, because we had to do different internships and externships. And I went to Seton Hall, and they were pretty good about putting us in different settings so that we really got a wide range of different experiences.
Mhm.
And so I really liked also working with the geriatric population, so like the elderly population. And so I think I was just really going back and forth between elderly and then the babies. But for me personally, working with the kids is a lot more lighthearted for me. And I
Mhm.
think it's very emotional and heavy working with the geriatric population. So for me, early intervention was just always a better fit.
Yeah, my path was very similar to yours, Tiffany, and started thinking I want adults and did geriatrics, and then slowly worked down to early intervention and then NICU babies through early intervention.
Oh,
So
how
I
nice.
literally was like the opposite end of the spectrum. But I do know exactly what you mean, where, yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons to both age groups, but you just kind of know if pediatrics are that's the group you want to work with. But I'm
Right.
curious, because I went through older students, public schools, and then moved to early intervention. Was it hard
Mhm.
for you to jump right from grad school to early intervention? Because it's a little bit like you need to know what you're doing. Did you feel like that was a hard transition?
Yes, I did, because when we do early intervention, you're going right into the family's homes or you're going into their daycare, and you really are on your own. I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're at a school, you might have other therapists who are there, or you have coworkers, or you could bounce off ideas with teachers and kind of get to know the child that way. And so going into early intervention, I remember asking my supervisor, okay, so now I just graduated and people trust me to just give therapy now. And she said, yeah, she's like, you just need to be confident in your skills because you just got out of school. So you have all of the current practices and research. You're up to date with the evidence based strategies. And I mean, I was just still nervous. And I think it was a learning experience, and that the only way to really learn is just diving right in. But yeah, I definitely made a lot of mistakes in those early sessions. And I'm sure if I went back to watch me in a session back then, I would probably be really cringing or maybe not even agreeing with some of the strategies that I was using back then. But I guess that's how you learn. I don't know.
We'll be right back to our interview. Take a moment to stretch your legs, but don't go anywhere because we want to talk to you about our podcast partner, Med Travelers. Med Travelers is an industry leader in allied travel career opportunities for a reason, featuring exclusive jobs at top-tier facilities across the United States, higher earning potential, W-2 employee status, and a flexible schedule. Med Travelers is your advocate for career success. Make sure to visit medtravelers.com to discover how Med Travelers can help drive your career forward. Again, go to medtravelers.com to start your travel journey today. And now back to the show. And I think that's such a great thing that you point out, that sometimes you're not going to be perfect and know all of it, but you just have to jump in. And I always think about, like what you said about, well, if I could go back and look at myself, I have a list mentally of people that I think, I wish I could go back and apologize. It's like, I didn't know what I was doing, but that's how we learn and that's how we get better. So I'm just really impressed that you decided to do that right away, because I think one of the differences as well between, for example, a school or the home is, in school, you don't necessarily have an audience. You oftentimes will take the student, go back to the room, work with them. But at home, you have an audience, the parent that's watching you and watching all the things that you're doing. And so if you're thinking, I don't know what I'm doing, it's very,
I know.
You could think like, okay, I'm just going to fake it. But yeah, so diving in sometimes, and you did, it sounds like you had a good supervisor, a strong supervisor, did your research, just came out, we're just out of school, so you were fresh with knowledge. But you're right, there is a certain point where, okay, I know what I know, and I just need to jump in.
Right. Yeah. And it reminded me of being in grad school and having someone observe me while I'm doing therapy. And, for my clinical fellowship in speech therapy, in early intervention, my supervisor wasn't there all the time. She was sometimes there through video, or she would come to a few sessions, but really it was mostly me by myself with the family. And like you said, it really is an audience, and you have to be able to learn how to work with everyone in the home, because sometimes it's not just the parent. Sometimes the grandparents are there. Sometimes there's a nanny. Sometimes the siblings are home, and there's a lot of chaos. And so, yeah, those early sessions, like you said, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't even know what they think of me now.
Sorry. Well, and one of the things that I learned early on also, well, probably not early enough, was that I'd come in, I'd know why I was doing what I was doing, but I'm sure from their perspective, and you hear that all the time, like, they just come in and play with my kid. Like, what are they even doing? Where I started to learn that I needed to talk through and say, it's going to look like I'm playing, but kids this age, that's how they learn, is through play. And so when I'm doing this, I'm actually working on this. And then I realized, oh, I should have been doing that all along.
Yes. I think that's such a natural thing to keep wanting to defend your job when you're a speech therapist, especially in early intervention, because everything is play-based. And, that's what I really advocate for. I love play-based therapy. I think that is the key for young children to learn. And I just had a session earlier today, and Mom is a huge supporter of play-based therapy, but she said, how could I explain your job to my parents, like 70-year-old parents? And, how can I explain that you're not just playing? Because to them, it seems like you're just playing. And so I was trying to just explain what I said about play being the best way for children to learn. I've gotten better, though, at just feeling confident in what I do and not constantly feeling like, oh, are they going to think I'm playing? Are they going to think I'm being too quiet? They're going to think I'm talking too much. They might think that they could do this on their own, which, they do after we come in and provide those strategies. But I think now I've been able to just say to myself, okay, you know what you're doing, and people can have their opinions, but at the end of the day, you're doing what's best for the child and for the family to have a better quality of life when you come in and with those strategies.
Yeah, and you're the expert. You've went to school for a long time, and so there definitely, I agree. We do have to defend ourselves, but I think then we get a little bit more credibility. Where it's like, oh, and I love that you bring up play, because I was just actually reading a book this weekend, and it talks about just how important play is and how it's almost something that kids don't get to do anymore because we structure everything for them. School is structured, right. After school time is structured, everything is structured, and how important play is. And I was actually on a college campus this weekend, and they were saying that one of the big things they do is, I was talking and saying, oh, is there a nightlife in this town? And she said, well, really, we do so much on campus that students don't really want to leave that live here, because we do hide and go seek and tag and this. And I'm thinking, these are college students, but you need to play from an early age until adulthood. It develops so many critical skills. And the book was outlining what they learn from play that they can never learn from, or learn differently, and not learn in the exact same way from very structured, everything being structured. So I love that you point that out.
That's so true. And it's more motivating for them to learn through play. Even for us, like you said, the college kids, when we're forced to sit down to do an activity, or we're using flashcards or drill work, that just does not work, especially for our toddlers and our young children. So play is just everything. We have to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like play with a purpose, right? We know what we're doing, but to the child, they're just playing. So, well, and I think most everybody knows what are the benefits of early intervention, but would you quickly remind us? And then I'd love to just hear from you. What are some things you've personally witnessed from starting services earlier versus waiting, if a parent's kind of on the fence?
Right. So it's always, the earlier, the better. As soon as you have any communication or developmental concerns, I would reach out to early intervention and have them come in for an evaluation. I've seen that children who get early intervention services tend to have less frustration when it comes to communicating their wants and needs. So if we have a child who is struggling to communicate what they want, they start to develop, these behaviors because they are so frustrated and can't get what they want. So for example, instead of being able to say or gesture a word, they will just throw themselves on the floor. And, that's how mom or dad will really try to give them their attention and figure out what they want. And so if that type of behavior continues for an extended period of time, it's going to be harder for them to self-regulate and get out of that habit. So the earlier we can come in and intervene and provide strategies for the family and everyone around the child, then the earlier they can figure out what's the way to communicate with everyone around them, rather than these frustrating habits that are going to happen. And there's also children who are late talkers and they just need that little push. And, sometimes it seems like they catch up to their peers. But in the research, it says that, if we don't catch these kids early, when they are tested, they still fall in the low average range. So we really want to be catching these kids early as soon as we see that there's a concern, to just reach out. It can't hurt.
That's how I feel. I always said, it's not like we're saying, take this pill. You may, you may have these horrible side effects, but we'll see. Let's just take it. It's like, no, this would be beneficial for any child, and especially one that's got a delay. And I'm curious, what are you seeing as far as, I know there was a period of time where it was sometimes pediatricians were, oh, let's just wait and see. Let's just wait and see. And then I felt like that improved, and pediatricians were more likely to say, you know what, let's refer or help the family get set up earlier. What are you seeing in that front?
Right. It's kind of a mix. I think there are some pediatricians who are really great and they say, oh, just reach out to early intervention. So I've heard that, especially when I get my early intervention kids, when I get them early, like when they're, I don't know, 15 months, let's say 15 to 18 months. And I'm like, oh, this is great. You're reaching out early. And they'll say, oh yeah, my pediatrician just told us to get the evaluation. And then other kids, which I feel terrible when this happens, but they get to early intervention when they're, 6 months, 5 months from aging out of early intervention. And they, and there's a lot of parent guilt with that. And they'll say, well, my pediatrician told me to wait and see. And that's such a common thing that people say, and not just pediatricians. I think we all hear things from friends and family saying, oh, so-and-so didn't talk until they were 5 and they're fine. They're totally fine. And then you hear those stories. And I think it's also coming from a place of fear from the parents. Maybe it's kind of like ignorance is bliss. They just want to wait and see and hope that the child will start to talk or communicate. So it's kind of a mixed review of pediatricians telling us to wait and see, or other pediatricians are more involved with the research and knowing that it's the earlier the better.
Yeah. And everything you just mentioned, I've seen as well, where you see these parents, they just feel terrible. Like, I just didn't know. And it's like, oh, and I even, working with the NICU babies. So the NICU babies that I've worked with were part of early intervention. And if this doesn't speak volumes, I don't know what does. So the NICU team was started because kids were getting referred it to after having spent time in the NICU for a variety of reasons. And then they had these global delays versus when we started seeing them as soon as they came home from the hospital from being discharged, they were being discharged from services from early intervention at the same time they were initially being referred. So these kids were done by 2 instead of being referred at 2. So not all of them, but more than half. So I always think, if that doesn't speak volumes, earlier is better, just for everything. And again, even if it's a short period of time, it's just so beneficial. So,
And sometimes I get messages from parents and they ask me, well, how late is too late? And then, so that's the other side. And I'll tell them it's never too late. There are always services available. So if parents did not reach out to early intervention before their child reached age 3, it's never too late. You could still get services from a private practice, at school. There are so many options. So even though we say the earlier the better, that's not to say that it's too late if you didn't reach out earlier.
Yeah. And that's a really important reminder. So I'm glad you said that. So, because I could see like, well, no, too late now. So I guess I won't. So, well, and I'd love to know, just from, you've got a lot of experience, what does play-based therapy look like?
So pre-COVID, I was able to, I would bring in a whole bag with different puzzles and books and toys. And I would just go and see what the child is interested in, and they would pick from the bag of toys. So now that we don't bring our own toys into early intervention, it's really about working with what the family has. And that really is how early intervention is meant to be, like really working with what the child has in their own environment so that families can carry over those strategies even when you're not there. So what it looks like is I will go in and just really follow the child's lead. And just because it's play doesn't mean we need to have toys. It could be sometimes they're interested in sitting in a cardboard box. And so we can use pretend play in that way. And maybe I'll push them around and provide verbal models of sounds like beep, beep, and we'll go wee and go all around the room. So it's really just about following the child's interests, and you're playing, and because you're just following their lead. You're not sitting down to give them flashcards or ask them a bunch of questions. You're there to play and support their play skills and communicate throughout all of that.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important reminder. I do love the pre-COVID, and I guess we're not post-COVID, so
I know.
I wish I could
Soon,
say that,
hopefully.
But yes, but it probably has forced, because I know that there was a period of time where I was like, I'm not going to bring in any toys, but then it was really hard, so that I was like, I'm just going to bring a couple of little motivators. But
Yes.
I'm curious, how does this work? Because I know, I'm just thinking through families I've worked with where I've come in sometimes and they may have a plethora of activities and toys and things. And I've worked with other families where they didn't even have a couch to sit on. So have you ever had where you're, okay, we've got to find something that we can incorporate into play, or how has that looked for you?
Yes, I've also experienced the same thing where sometimes it's a little distracting for the child when there are so many different toys and activities right there. So I'll provide strategies for them to really limit those toys or rotate them or organize them. And then on the other side, when they really don't have much, you really just have to work with what they have. Maybe that's getting a piece of paper and a pen and drawing and using sound effects while you're drawing. Pots and pans, that's something that we could use. But yeah, you really do have to be creative and think outside the box when families don't have many resources. And that's the beauty of early intervention. You're coming in and showing them that you don't need expensive toys or books to be able to play and incorporate language.
Yeah. And that's such a great reminder, because there are times where we go in with all these things and then it's like, okay, they're all going away now. And the kid's watching everything they've enjoyed. And then you're right. The parent is like, how am I supposed to replicate this? So
yeah. And I've really been liking just working with what the family has, because a huge part of speech therapy is having families carry over the strategies that we implement. Because if we go in once a week for 45 minutes to an hour, but then that's it, that will not do anything unless the family is really involved and using the strategies that you provide. And I think when we had those bags of toys and everything, I think it was like, okay, this is the child's designated time to learn. And then when the speech therapist leaves, then that's, then we're just doing other things, then we're home. But now that they learn how to use what they have and do the same things that we do during speech, then it's much better for the child's outcomes.
Yeah. And it probably helps the parent and caregivers feel more confident that they can do those things. It's like, oh yeah, I've watched the therapist do them, and now I can try to imitate some of that. And you're exactly right. An hour, I always say, if an hour a week worked to magically make everything better, I would be on an island somewhere living.
Exactly.
So it doesn't, you're right. The carryover, that's not how it happens. Now, do you ever incorporate just routines like, okay, we're going to work on washing our hands or brushing our teeth, or do you incorporate meals or snacks as part of your therapy?
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on what the family's priorities are. So I think it's easy as speech therapists to, go into a home and say, oh, okay, I feel like this is wrong, and they could change this about their routine, and I'm going to tell them about this strategy. But I think what's really important to think about first is, what does the family want out of speech therapy? What's the most difficult part of their day or their routine, or how does the child's communication difficulties affect their family? And I think no matter what that is, it's up to us to provide those strategies. But it depends, because sometimes I have parents say, oh, snack time is such a difficult time for us, or getting dressed in the morning is such a difficult time for us. So whatever it is, that's what we work with.
And again, I know I've said this about 16 times, but that is such a good reminder, because I think regardless of setting, if it's not meaningful, if it's not practical, then it's not going to have follow through. So if we come in as therapists and say, oh, this is what I think we should be working on, but it's not what the family believes that they or feels strongly, well, then there's a mismatch, and we definitely always have to meet them where they're at. So again, such a great reminder. And what do you do because I remember vividly having a few times of the child like running away and not wanting to have anything to do with me. And so I'd kind of be sitting in the living room, twiddling my thumbs like, okie dokie. What do you do if the child is just not interested in engaging with you?
Sometimes there are sessions where that happens. And I have some kids who are very, very active and want to run around the whole time. If it's a child who is just active and wants to run around, I'll run around with them and provide verbal models like we're running, jump, jump, jump. You're providing language that way. If I have a child who's really not interested, I will just back off and sit, maybe talk with the parents, provide a lot of parent coaching and education. Because if I chase after the child, or I'm like carrying them to force them to sit down, that is just counterproductive. And I'll tell the parents that, and I'll say, this is typical, because first of all, I'm a different person. I'm a new person in their home. So sometimes they don't want to. And there are also times where I've been in the home for months and months, and the child is just having a bad day and does not feel like doing speech therapy. And I think that's okay. And I'll let the parents know too, you don't have to feel pressure to keep the child here in front of me, because I think it's easy for parents to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry they're not staying. And I try to tell them that part of early intervention is me coaching you through different strategies. And it could just be a time where I'm answering questions from the parent. And then, of course, I'll try to communicate with the child, but in a way where it's no pressure. If you want to come sit down, I have this exciting toy in front of me. If you want to come here, you can. If not, come over when you're ready. And that usually works better, because it's just no pressure.
Yeah, because if we teach them that you will do this, we will have fun, then they start to dread it. Whereas they don't look at it as, oh, this is fun. This person comes, we play, we have a good time. And to your point too, we all have days where we just don't feel like doing the things that we should do. But as adults, we still have to go to work. We do those things, but we have days where we feel like, I really don't want to do this. Kids are no different, but they just are able to to not do it. They don't have to.
Right.
So,
I tell parents that all the time too. I said, just like we have days where we're tired and don't want to do anything, they're doing the same thing. They're just having difficulty communicating it to us, but sometimes that happens. And again, we have to follow their lead.
Yeah. I mean, we've all felt like throwing ourselves on the floor in the grocery store and having a tantrum. I mean, even as please say yes, Tiffany, please say yes. I tell parents, I'm like, listen, we just know that we can't, we've learned that that's not an appropriate way to communicate, but they have not learned that yet. So it's right. Okay. Yeah. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, how do you incorporate the parents and caregivers in a session?
So it depends. It changes from family to family. And I know I say that a lot, but really every home you go into is going to be a completely different situation. So sometimes I have parents who are more happy just sitting there and observing. And, I've had parents like just on their phone during sessions, and I'll try to give them updates here and there. But then I have some parents who will be right there on the floor with us playing. So I try to I'll try to tell them what I'm doing. So I will say, "Oh, you see how she's playing with the car right now? We could provide her with some verbal models, and then we'll go in and say beep beep, and I'll just let them know when you're home and she's playing. If she's more quiet, you can provide narration for what she's doing." So part of it is me speaking with the parent, and then most of it is just me playing with the child. And I think through observing, the parents can see what type of language I'm using, what's the pitch of my voice, how am I communicating? So, it just really varies from family to family and how involved they want to be during the session. But it's really up to them.
Yeah, I had that same experience where it was all, it's like the kids, you don't want to force them to you must participate, because even if they're there observing, like you said, they may hear that, oh, wow, they're using far fewer words to communicate. I've been using these sentences and the child doesn't have any idea what I'm saying, but I'm watching you use 2 to 3 words and the child seems to be understanding. So even something as simple as that, where you're not saying, do you see what I'm doing? But they're seeing what you're doing and seeing the response you're getting is enough to say, oh, maybe I should try that.
Right. And I think that's nice for a speech therapist when a parent can observe and take it all in and then carry it over. Sometimes when parents are really involved, I think the child starts to feel it a little bit. And it's natural for parents to do certain things, like ask their child, what is this? Say car. Is this a car? You said it before, but she said it before. It's a car. And so that puts on pressure, for the child. And so sometimes when I get those parents who are happy to sit back and jump in when they need to and help me figure out what the child is trying to communicate, that's great. But you get a mixed bag of people.
Yes, you're what you just did was, I was like, I've seen, yes, a million times. Or they feel like come on, give the right answer. It's like, no, this is not a test. This is no, it's okay. Because they feel like, oh, is this a reflection of me if they don't do this or if this happens? And it's like, no, not at all. So.
Yeah. And that's what I want parents to know. I'm not going in to judge their parenting skills. And, a child's delay has nothing to do with your parenting skills. Sometimes there is just a speech delay and we don't know what the underlying cause is. And that's one thing that I try to tell parents. Don't worry. It's okay. They'll say, oh, but he was saying this before. And I'll tell them, I believe you. Sometimes it's pressure and I'm a new person and maybe, he just doesn't feel like saying it right now. So I think if parents go into speech therapy more with a mindset of like, okay, this therapist is here to help us and not to judge our child or judge our parenting, then I think it makes for a more smooth session and we could really work together better that way.
Yeah, it just builds that bridge between, because again, we're only as successful as the people that are with the child all the rest of the time that we're not there. So
right, exactly.
We definitely want them to feel, and I also, agree that not putting pressure on them and also just using that language where they don't feel like we're using technical jargon of any kind. And so they feel like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about, so I'm just going to sit here and smile. So.
Right. Yeah. Technical jargon. Yeah. That's the other thing. When we're going into homes, we want to be able to communicate with the parents in ways that they can understand and not use all of our, vocabulary words from grad school.
Yes.
We want to make it as simple and as easy as possible for them so that they will carry over the strategies.
Yeah. I'm just curious, do you give homework or here, I want you to work on this during the week? What's your philosophy on that?
Yeah. So depending on how it goes during the session, I write up a session note after each session that gets sent to the parents. So it will just have things that we did during this session, and then at the bottom, it will have different strategies that they can use. But I don't give any homework, like you must target this word this week. I just really reiterate the strategies that we're consistently working on. And I just let them know I'm available through phone, text, email, and they could ask me questions throughout the week until I see them again, but no homework.
Yeah, that's something that, speaking of I'm sorry, I'm sure nobody ever did it, but I remember giving like, this week, I would like you to complete this. And I'm thinking, what was I doing? Like they had 4 kids that mom was hanging on by a thread. What was I doing? I'm so sorry.
I know. It's so tough. Yeah. And that's every family has so many things going on. And for early intervention, at least, I think that it's very play-based and it has to be functional for the family. Yes. So if homework is not functional and it's not going to increase their quality of life at home, then we don't do it. Yeah. If it's something that they want to do, of course, I'm open to providing whatever they want, but it all just has to work for their family. Because if it doesn't, then it's all counterproductive.
I think that's a great thing to think through if you're going to give homework for any age group.
Right.
Like, is it going to serve the purpose that we want, or is it just going to be to check a box? And so I really like the way you put that. So if somebody is listening that is doing early intervention, is feeling like, I just feel like I need some new ideas, or is wanting to get into early intervention, because I do feel like I see more people that are interested in going into early intervention now, wanting a break from the schools. What do you recommend as far as resources or places? Where do you go to get your information or ideas?
So what's actually been so helpful is Instagram. There are so many knowledgeable speech therapists on there. Of course, you have to figure out who is a reputable source, but there is so much information out there that is easy to digest because it's on an Instagram post. You're just scrolling through. You can save some things. I've learned a lot through, fellow speech therapists on there. And for parents, I think that's easy for them too. And I've actually given certain parents different Instagram accounts for them to look at, and it's helpful and it's easy, and it's easy to access. For speech therapists, there are courses online. You can find free courses. And I think really the best way, like I said before, it's just like getting into it and doing it and getting that experience for therapists.
Yeah. And it always feels, everything always, first time doing anything, it's scary. You feel like you don't know what you're doing, but you kind of get in a routine. One podcast I listened to a lot when I was doing early intervention, because I had a lot of time to drive, was the Laura Mize, the Teach Me to Talk. Do you know her or any of her work?
I have not. No, I have not listened to her, but that's okay. I will look it up after this.
Yeah, that Teach Me to Talk. There's just so many good early intervention ideas. And like you said, Instagram, you're a great resource. There's just so many just great resources out there now. And I agree with you. The Instagram, when we want just, I don't want to read a whole book. I just need give me just a few tidbits. And I agree. Instagram is so great for that, because sometimes the last thing you want to do is go read another book or
exactly, or read a research article.
Yes.
Instagram is a great place. And now there's TikTok and Instagram, YouTube. It's all right there for you. So it's not like something you have to go to the library for, or, it's just easy and simple.
Yeah, I agree. So one final question is just, you've done so many cool things. It sounds like you're just such a guru within the early intervention field, and really just, as you're talking, I'm thinking you haven't been doing this all that long, and you know so much that it took me a long time to really feel like I had to figure out. I was like, where were you, Tiffany, when I was? But what's next? What's next for you professionally? What would you like to do next? So
I think just continuing with early intervention and really learning more, because it is constantly a learning process. And I think I'll never be like, okay, I have mastered this completely and I don't have anything new to learn. So I think just continuing early intervention. And then I would like to continue advocating for earlier intervention. And I do a lot of that through my social media, talk, teach, speech. So I think just continuing to build that and grow it. I'm still trying to figure out what's the right fit and where this brand is going. But just continuing to do this. And I love early intervention. I love being able to do this every day. And I could see myself doing this for a long time.
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm really glad that the marketing didn't work out for you because I feel like this field is so lucky to have you. And it sounds like you really have found the place you need to be. And again, your social media, you're a wealth of knowledge. And I love that you're advocating, because I do think that's where you start to really see those changes happen. And by even getting more pediatricians to understand that earlier is better, getting parents to understand, getting even hospitals to understand. That's what we had to do with the NICU babies, is actually go out to the hospitals and say, you don't have to wait. You can actually refer them before they even leave the NICU. So I love that you're doing that. And we will put all of your contact information in the show notes so that people know how to follow you and can see all the cool things that you're working on.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was so nice.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. I loved getting to spend this time with you and appreciate all of your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.